Post office and this kind of agenda is a bit of an oxymoron, because if you think about innovation being the solution to the problem, the question is, what kind of role can a post office play? So just before diving into some of the thoughts, and nothing more than that, just a quick snapshot of what the post office is in Italy. We have a heritage about a territorial proximity. We have 13,000 offices. We move about 35,000 people every day to deliver mail. But we also have a banking side, or I should say transaction banking. We're about 13 million, most of them kids, who have a prepaid debit card. And we also have the saving side of the story, because if you put together the various forms of savings under custody that we run, it's about 470 billion. So it's a kind of a peculiar systemic machine that is at the core of what mass market do in Italy in terms of fundamental services. And I joined about slightly less than 2 years ago with a mandate to rethink the mission and to help the country, for the jobs we operate in, to move forward in terms of digitization and innovation in services. And because of the systemic nature of what we do, obviously, obviously maybe it's not that obvious, but I have found a company that was already sensitive to the environmental issues. And therefore I won't dwell on that. You know, we have all our challenging targets. We're committed to achieve them in terms of carbon footprint. But the real challenge is, what is the role in the context of a fundamentally transforming society that we could play? And the observation, and I don't dwell on that, is that actually, if you go beyond the myth of digitization as a democratic, fancy stuff that puts everybody happy, the reality is that's a hell of a divisive trend. And that if you let it run, as we let run other parts of the capital and capitalistic society, you're going to be finding yourself at the end of the road more divided than at the beginning. And I often refer to the analogy with the television signal. In the analog television, if you get your signal kind of okay, you still see a bit of a fuzzy image. But in the digital world, either you get it or you don't. And the risk of exclusion is enormous. So we thought that by having the ambition of positioning the company, obviously for the jobs we do, for the logistics, the payment, the savings, as an engine of inclusive development, we could kind of fulfill the traditional mission of a postal service, which is a factor of social cohesion, but in a digitized world, in a multi-ethnic world, frankly, in a substantially more unjust world that we've inherited from the past. And you know, the couple of thoughts I want to share here is that if you revisit the kind of things we do with the metrics or the perspective of lowering inequality, all of a sudden you find more than niches, but huge markets where we could play a role. And if I take in turn the three of them, if you take logistics and e-commerce, there is a hell of a battle to fight to put the traditional merchant on equal footing to the Amazon of this world in re-engaging a relationship with consumers. If you go into transaction banking, there are millions of customers, or citizens I should say, in this country with no bank account, and a growing number of new Italians, which is the polite way of saying immigrants, that have a hell of a challenge of getting into traditional banks. We have devised call it as you wish, a prepaid debit card with a sort code or an IBAN, kind of that is a plastic bank account with 10 euros, you get in your pocket, you walk in an office, you walk out, and you have it. And it's proving a very efficient way of an inclusive tool to lower opaqueness, if you wish, right? You know, the entire system of transparency as a prerequisite to inclusive development, a very important ingredient. And finally, and I don't have time to go into too much of thinking, if you think about savings, in the zero interest rate world we're in, either you have the $100 or $150 or more likely $200,000 to play with in private banking, or you shut out of the system where you have perspective of earnings, right? Because you're left with T-bonds, and T-bonds you have to pay to get them these days. So, the mission we have given ourselves is, can we democratize access to tools that should, in principle, accelerate inclusion, put everybody on an equal footing, and make sure that technology is really put to the service of mass market. And interestingly, what we find, and we're still early in the path here, in the journey, that the physical side of proximity, the offices and the postman, are kind of a conduit to make this digital funny stuff a bit more palatable and understandable to people who would be otherwise completely excluded. And as part of that, we are now investing and promoting with the government, we're not doing that on our own, investment in what we find essential for a guaranteed sustainable development, which is the development of immaterial infrastructures. And Giovanna was talking about that before, but the idea, for instance, we now promoted with the government the notion of digital identity, a public system of digital identity, as a direct, secure, guaranteed access to a bunch of databases. We are starting on today. There will be the possibility in our post offices, together with other companies, of getting this digital credentials, digital passport. I can imagine you could have an opportunity to move away the intermediary mob of the public administration that is making a business out of trading information. So, we are not by all means done yet, but I think I found this meeting very, very well structured. Thank you to the Fondazione Mattei and to you, Time guys, for sharing this with us. I'm encouraged by what I hear. There is an enormous opportunity here ahead of us. There is really an enormous opportunity. And it's the opportunity of going back to the drawing board and redrawing, resetting the rules. And I think that should not be short of opportunity to have young kids, maybe as inspired as you have in your university, even potentially join the post office with a mission. And having the post office being measured not just in terms of revenues and margins, but perhaps on the impact we might have on the Gini coefficient in Italy, where perhaps inequality through post office might get a tiny bit lower. Thank you.
Thank you.